I don't know where to start. Maybe with the fact that I'm not a bad person. At least, that's what I used to think for most of my life. My name is Emily, I'm 32, and I live in a small suburb of Portland. I had a husband, Michael, kind, calm, intelligent. We'd been together for almost 10 years. We have a daughter, Olivia. She's 6. And if anyone looked at us from the outside, they'd say, a perfect family. But behind those beautiful social media pictures and smiles at holidays was a woman slowly losing herself. Michael was always busy. Work, projects, deadlines. I stayed home with our child, then started working remotely. But I felt life was slipping through my fingers. We rarely talked about anything beyond chores. Then I met Lucas, a co-worker from the marketing firm. He was nothing like Michael. Bright, confident, always looking straight into my eyes. And when he said, "You look like someone who forgot what it feels like to be alive," I froze because he was right. Our messages started innocently, jokes, light flirting. But every time he texted me, my heart raced. I knew it was dangerous. I knew I was playing with fire, but I wanted so badly to feel alive again. That night, when it happened, I didn't plan anything. We stayed late at the office, drinking coffee, talking about life. Then a touch, a look, a breath. I didn't stop it. And now, as I write this, 6 months have passed. Michael doesn't know, but every time I look into his eyes, I feel like he senses the truth. And I can't decide what's worse, that he'll find out, or that he never will. After that night, I thought I could just forget, tell myself it was a mistake, that it would never happen again. But you can't bury the truth too deep, it always finds a way to surface. I saw Lucas at work every day. At first, we pretended nothing had happened, said hi, talked about projects, like regular coworkers. But there was always that tension between us, invisible, almost tangible. Sometimes he'd give me a look that made it hard to breathe. Michael started to sense something. I could see the way he looked at me, longer than usual, as if trying to read a secret behind my eyes. He became more attentive, asked about my day more often, and that made it worse. His kindness felt like a slow knife twisting in my chest. One evening I broke. We were having dinner when he asked, "Are you okay, Em? You've seemed distant lately." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. Said something about being tired, about work, but I could feel the tears pressing in my throat. When he went to bed, I sat alone in the dark kitchen, staring at my phone. A message from Lucas blinked on the screen. "I can't stop thinking about you." I knew I should block him. Knowing and doing are two different things. I typed back, "It's hard for me too." And in that moment, I realized it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next week, we met again. I don't think I even resisted. I was drawn to him like a magnet. I told myself I needed love, understanding, passion. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a mistake anymore. It was a choice, and it would change everything. The longer it went on, the harder it became to live a double life. In the morning, I made coffee for Michael, smiled at our daughter, packed her for school, and at the same time checked my phone to delete Lucas's messages before anyone could see them. Every call made me flinch. Every glance from my husband felt too sharp, too curious. I felt like I was walking on thin ice, waiting to hear it crack. One day, Michael grabbed my phone to look for a photo for our family album. I nearly fainted. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I smiled, pretending to stay calm, but my mind was screaming, "If he opens the chat, it's over." He didn't. He smiled, handed the phone back and said, "I love these pictures of us. We look so happy." I almost cried, because I knew we weren't those people anymore. Things with Lucas were changing too. At first, he was caring, passionate, attentive. But then he started demanding more time, more messages, more of me. He grew jealous. One day he said outright, "I don't want to share you with him. If you really love me, make a choice." I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to lose Michael, but I couldn't let go of Lucas either. I was trapped in a cage I had built myself. That night I couldn't sleep. Michael breathed peacefully beside me. Olivia was asleep in her room, and I stared into the darkness, realizing my life was turning into sand slipping through my fingers. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Tired eyes, tense face, a smile that didn't belong to me anymore. And for the first time, I felt true fear, because the lie wasn't just part of my life anymore. It was my life. I always thought cheating only mattered when you got caught, that if no one found out, it didn't really hurt anyone. But the truth is, it eats you alive. Even if no one knows, you're no longer the same person. Michael had changed. He didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't explode, he just went quiet. And his silence was worse than any words. It pressed down on me, heavy like thick air. He stopped asking where I was. He stopped hugging me when I walked by. We lived under the same roof, but in different worlds. I kept trying to justify it to myself. He's just tired. He's stressed. But deep down, I knew he knew something. One evening, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, he came up behind me and asked quietly, "Are you happy, Emily?" I didn't know what to say. It sounded like such a simple question, but behind it were doubt, pain, exhaustion, and mistrust. "Yes, of course," I said, and even to my own ears, my voice sounded fake. He nodded, smiled, but in his eyes, I saw something that felt like acceptance, as if he had already figured everything out and just didn't want to hear it from me. Later that week, I met Lucas again, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know where else to go. He held me, and all I felt was emptiness. His touch no longer comforted me. Everything felt wrong, cold, foreign. When I got home, Michael was asleep on the couch. Beside him was a printed restaurant receipt from a place I'd never gone with him. He didn't say a word, but he didn't have to. That night, I realized my life was falling apart. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Like when the lights go out in a room, and for a few seconds, you can still see the outlines before everything disappears into darkness. I don't remember exactly how it happened. Maybe every lie has an expiration date, and mine reached it that Sunday morning. Michael was standing by the window when I walked out of the bedroom. He was holding my phone in his hands. His face was calm, too calm. That was the scariest part. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. His voice was quiet, no yelling, no anger, just a question that made the air feel heavy. I froze. My heart was pounding so fast I could barely breathe. "Michael, I saw everything. The messages, the pictures, the name. The ground disappeared beneath me. I wanted to scream, to explain that it wasn't what he thought, that I didn't mean for it to happen. But in that moment, I knew no words would fix it. "Why?" he asked. "What did I do wrong?" And that question broke me, because there was no answer. He hadn't done anything wrong. It was me. I had lost myself. I cried, trying to speak through the tears. "I was lonely, Michael. I felt like you didn't see me anymore, like I was just existing." He listened silently, then he nodded. "And you thought he was the solution?" I couldn't answer. The truth was too bitter. We sat there in silence. Our daughter was playing in her room, and between us was a void no apology could ever fill. When he finally stood up, he said just one thing. "I don't know what happens next, but right now, I can't even look at you." He walked out, closing the door softly behind him. And that's when I learned what real silence feels like. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of the one whose voice felt like home. The house felt different without Michael. The silence was unbearable. Even the refrigerator hummed louder than before. I walked through the rooms and caught myself looking for traces of him, his mug, his book, his jacket. But he'd taken everything. Even the smell of his cologne had vanished from the air. Olivia asked, "Where's Daddy?" And every time, my heart shattered. I couldn't tell her the truth. I just said he was at work, that he'd be home soon. She believed me. Children always believe in the better version of things. I tried to go on with life, but every day felt like punishment. At work, I couldn't focus, and Lucas had become distant too. Maybe he didn't want to be part of my wrecked life. His messages grew shorter, colder, less frequent. One day he simply wrote, "I think we need a break." It was almost ironic. I had destroyed my marriage for a man who didn't even want to stay. At night, I couldn't sleep. I'd scroll through old photos, me and Michael at the beach, at Christmas, at Olivia's first day of school. All those moments that once felt eternal, now gone because of a few moments of weakness. I started keeping a journal. I wrote everything, my thoughts, my guilt, my pain. It didn't make it better, but at least it kept me from falling apart. Sometimes I'd write letters to him, not to send them, but just to say, "I'm sorry." Weeks passed, and Michael didn't call, didn't text, nothing. The emptiness became my new normal. No voice, no warmth, no laughter. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't just lost my husband. I had lost myself, the version of me that once knew what love, trust, and peace felt like. It had been 2 months since Michael left. We hadn't seen each other, spoken, or exchanged a single message. At first, I waited every day, jumped at every notification, checked my inbox constantly, even hoped to see his car parked outside, but nothing, just emptiness. One night, I finally gathered the courage to text him. Just a short message. "Can we talk?" He replied the next morning, "Not now." 2 words and my world collapsed again. I reread them dozens of times. They hurt more than any insult. Because indifference, that's the quietest kind of ending. A week later, I saw him by accident at the grocery store. He looked tired but calm. He was wearing a new jacket I'd never seen before. We exchanged a quick hi. His eyes were cold, distant. Olivia ran up to him, and he lifted her into his arms, smiling, but even then, he didn't look at me. I stood aside, watching them talk, realizing I had no right to feel jealous. I was the one who built this wall between us. When he set Olivia down, I said softly, "Michael, please, just tell me what you feel." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at me through me and said, "I feel peace, and that's what scares me the most." Those words burned into my memory, because I realized he used to be my peace, and now he had found it in life without me. That night, I cried for real, not from guilt or fear, but from the understanding that love, even when it's real, doesn't always end with a scream. Sometimes it ends with silence. 6 months had passed. I had gotten used to waking up without him, to eating breakfast alone, watching Olivia draw, and hearing the quiet question in her voice that I still didn't know how to answer. Sometimes she'd ask, "Mom, do you miss Dad?" And I'd always say the same thing, "Yes, sweetheart." But missing someone you loved isn't always bad. I started going to therapy. At first, I didn't want to. I thought it was shameful, that I should handle it on my own. But therapy became the only place where I could be honest. There was no judgment there, only questions. And the most important one was, when was the last time you loved yourself? I couldn't answer. Maybe that's why I did what I did. Because I was looking for love on the outside when there was none left inside. I still thought about Michael. But now, it wasn't guilt, it was something else. A quiet kind of gratitude. He had been a chapter in my life that taught me something important. True love doesn't save you from yourself. It just holds your hand while you learn how to stand. I learned to be alone, not strong, just real. To make coffee, not for someone else, but for myself. To smile, not for a photo, but because the day actually felt good. One morning, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I was breathing freely. No fear, no lies, no past weighing on me. It wasn't happiness, but it was a beginning. It was an ordinary Saturday morning. I was washing dishes when I heard a familiar knock at the door. My heart skipped. I didn't even need to look through the peephole. I knew who it was. Michael stood there, holding a bag with Olivia's things he'd forgotten to bring back earlier. He had that same calm smile I once loved, the one that now hurt more than words ever could. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I replied, trying to sound composed, even though my insides were shaking. He set the bag down by the door, but didn't leave. "I thought we should talk. Not about the past, about now." We sat at the kitchen table. The silence was oddly peaceful, like the air before rain. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "I just want to know if you're happy." I looked down at my hands for a long moment. Then I said, "I don't know, but maybe for the first time in a long time, I'm being honest with myself, and that feels peaceful." He nodded. "I feel peaceful too," he said. "But sometimes that's the saddest feeling, when it finally stops hurting." We talked for a few more minutes, not about us, but about Olivia, her school, the small things, but every word carried what we didn't say. "I still remember you." When he stood up, I asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" He looked straight into my eyes and said, "Maybe one day, but not for you, for me." And then he left. No anger, no tears, no slammed doors, just quiet. I stood by the window, watching him walk away, and finally understood. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about getting someone back. It's about accepting that the story is over. It's been almost a year. Sometimes I catch myself realizing I don't even remember who I was before all this. It's like that woman wasn't me, just someone distant, foolish, but so painfully alive. I don't look for excuses anymore. And I don't look for forgiveness. Some things you just have to accept, not because they're right, but because they've become part of who you are. Olivia's growing up, and in her eyes, I see a light that saves me every single day. She reminds me that love isn't always the story between two adults. Sometimes it's simply the ability to stay, to be warmth for someone who needs it. Sometimes I dream of Michael. We're sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, laughing. In the dream, we're still as happy, real. And when I wake up, it doesn't hurt anymore. It's just peaceful. Because I know that chapter has ended. And maybe that's what real forgiveness is. I've learned to love small things again: the smell of rain, the first sip of hot coffee, a stranger's smile. Life isn't perfect now, but it's mine again. And that in itself feels like victory. I often wonder, if I could go back, what would I change? Probably nothing. Because every mistake led me here, to a version of myself that's real, honest, and yes, scarred, but whole. Sometimes in the evenings, I sit on the porch, look at the sky, and realize that not every story needs a happy ending. Some stories just need to teach you how to keep living. And mine did exactly that.